Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Teniola Shoboale in Lagos, Nigeria. We begin in Ethiopia, which is expressing regret over the African Union's unilateral decision to appoint a panel to investigate alleged human rights violations in the country's Tigray region. Ethiopia's response is contained in a statement by the Ethiopian Foreign Ministry. It said the AU's Rights Commission had not followed the right procedure that would allow the necessary conditions for an investigation. On June the 16th, the African Union's Rights Commission announced that it was beginning an investigation in Tigray today and requested the cooperation from all those involved. Ethiopia, however, says it had in March expressed its willingness to engage the Commission for a joint investigation over the situation in the region. It says after follow-up discussions, the Commission had written to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, accepting Ethiopia's proposal and invitation for the joint investigation. Ethiopia says it considers the latest move as undermining the cooperative spirit of its government to formalize the modalities of the stated investigation. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's closest neighbor, Eritrea, is criticizing the United Nations Security Council and the UN humanitarian chief, Mark Lowcock, for rehashing unfounded claims against the country. The Eritrean government denies charges leveled against it by Mr. Lowcock, who told a closed-door Security Council meeting on Tuesday that Eritrean soldiers were using starvation as a weapon of war. He also told the council that rape was being used to terrorize women and girls. He said no one should be surprised to see a repeat of the horrific famine in 1984 if the violence continued and the Eritrean troops did not withdraw. According to the Eritrean mission in New York, it was neither invited nor given an opportunity to comment on the subject, and Eritrea objects to the unfortunate and opaque methodology employed to smear the country's image. Eritrea also says the allegations were being driven by public interest and accuses Mr. Lowcock of having a motive against Eritrea for reasons known to him alone. Monday, June the 21st, will be decision day for many Ethiopians as they will be participating in national and regional parliamentary elections. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has promised this would be the country's first free and fair polls after decades of repressive rule.
It is an election with high hopes but drooping expectations. For many months, Ethiopia's Tigray conflicts have dominated news in the country, even drawing international attention, and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's response is yet to reassure people that all will be well, either during the election or even after. Voting has been delayed in 110 out of 547 constituencies already because of the violent conflicts and logical problems, and some political parties are boycotting the elections over what they describe as harassment of family members. One of the candidates is contesting while in jail. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed had won international applause and Nobel Peace Prize for democratic reforms and for ending 2 decades of hostilities with neighboring Eritrea when he named head of Ethiopia's governing coalition in 2018. Within months of taking office, he unbanned opposition parties, released tens of thousands of political prisoners, and took steps to open up one of Africa's last untapped markets. Now he faces mounting international pressure over the war in northern Tigray, as well as accusations from rights groups that his government is rolling back some new freedoms, which it denies. The elections on Monday will be a test for Abiy's government. He also believes it will be the country's first attempt at free and fair elections. The ones in the past were tainted by accusations of vote rigging. Back in 2015, the ruling coalition and its allies won every parliamentary seat. Some 37 million of Ethiopia's 109 million people have registered to cast ballots, although some will have to wait until the second round of voting in September. No date has been set for voting in Tigray, where Ethiopia's military has been fighting the region's former governing party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, since November. Abiy's Prosperity Party remains the frontrunner in a field of 46 parties vying for parliamentary seats. The opposition is fragmented between smaller, mostly ethnically based parties. Modera Gudina, an ethnic Oromo and head of the Oromo Federalist Congress, was initially supportive of Abiy's reform agenda, but he said his party would boycott the elections after regional security forces shot down 203 of their offices in Oromia region during the last year, leaving only 3 open. Modera, a former political prisoner, said thousands are detained. The elections were originally scheduled for August 20, but Abiy postponed them, citing the COVID-19 pandemic. The TPLF held elections in Tigray anyway, setting it on a coalition course with the government. The fighting in Tigray has killed thousands and displaced more than 2 million people. Last week, the United Nations warned of famine conditions in some areas.
Well, the VOA's Heather Murdoch is in Addis Ababa. Heather, good to have you on the program. Let's begin with preparations for the upcoming elections. Well, we're hearing that some of the candidates are crying foul over an level playing field and the fact that some members of the opposition are in jail. What are you hearing as regards how the government of Abiy Ahmed is reacting to these reports and the narrative he's selling about participation in the polls?
Yes, there have been a lot of criticisms, as you said. We spoke to a member, candidate running for parliament today who was saying he is a member of one of the opposition parties, and some of his offices have been closed in regions known for supporting the prime minister, and some campaign events have had to be canceled because they were forced to close them down. And there's been other criticisms like this, like candidates in jail. There's one candidate that's actually running his campaign from the jail. We saw his supporters marching on the street the other day. But while the prime minister has been pretty quiet during the course of this campaign, yesterday he held a rally in his hometown, and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that he predicted a safe election, and he has said that this election will be free and fair despite all the criticism. So his government and the Prime Minister himself seem quite optimistic.
Yeah, just to touch on what you said there, Prime Minister Ahmed has declared this the country's first free and fair election in years. But do people feel the same way?
Well, you know, a lot of people do feel the same way. I mean, we haven't had the elections yet, but the campaign period, despite all the criticism, has also been marked by more free political discourse than people in the streets say they have seen in their lifetimes in Ethiopia. You see opposition parties holding rallies, or you did up until yesterday, all over town, and not a lot of fear of speaking. And even some of the people we talked to who were afraid of speaking out because they supported candidates that were jailed and said they were not going to vote because they were disenchanted with the process, were also impressed with the level of free political speech in Ethiopia right now, and said they hadn't seen that before either.
All right, Heather, let's turn to the crisis in Tigray and the Ethiopian government lashing out at the African Union about the investigation it says begins today into allegations of rights violations in the region. You know, it's interesting that the AU is stepping in at this point, but will Ethiopia allow the investigation to go on?
It's hard to say what Ethiopia will or will not allow. A lot of the roads and areas of the Tigray region are closed to aid workers and journalists, and I assume that would be true for investigators. But what I can say is that the people in Tigray are crying out for independent investigations for so many reasons. We spent the past 2 weeks traveling in the region, and we met victims of sexual violence and victims of massacres that all said they were desperate for an independent investigation to either back up what they think has happened or explain to them what they think has happened, because some of these atrocities and some of these conflicts are very confusing on the ground because they happen very fast with multiple military parties. So I do hope that an independent investigation that is credible goes through. But if it will go through in its way and how fast it will happen leaves to be seen.
And Heather, speaking of Tigray, amid all this, will the elections be happening there as well?
No, there will be no elections in Tigray, and the elections will be postponed in many other places. In Tigray, it's unique in that there simply are not elections, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the basic security reason. The war in Tigray started after Tigray had its own regional elections, when the federal government postponed them because of the coronavirus, and then the federal government declared those elections illegal. Following that, war broke out. So it would stand to reason that there'd be a considerable security issue with polls. Also, Tigrayans themselves say, we already voted for the people we wanted to elect. And that party is the Tigray People's Liberation Front, is now been declared a terrorist organization by the federal government. So it wouldn't be taking place in a federal election. So there's the security reason and also the practical reason of that the federal government now controls apparently most of the region, but they've only been there at the earliest since last November, which is certainly not enough time to establish elections, notoriety within the community, and any way that the people would have the knowledge of who to vote for if they had an election.
All right, then, VOA's Heather Murdoch, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed.
Thank you.
Well, checking in on South Sudan as the President Salva Kiir and his first Vice President Riek Machar instruct government agencies to speed up the graduation of army recruits. Both leaders have been discussing the bringing together of the soldiers coming from different sides of the recent civil war. They're undergoing training in various camps across the country. The thousands of new recruits are mainly from the South Sudanese Army, the Sudan People's Liberation Army in opposition, led by Mr. Machar, and the South Sudan Opposition Alliance. The revitalized peace agreement requires the screening and training of 83,000 unified forces to safeguard the peace deal. So the COVID-19 situation in Kenya, as blood donation services have been affected by the global pandemic. Donors who have doses of doses, of the AstraZeneca vaccine have to wait for at least 7 days before donating blood. There is a shortage of blood in the country, and the National Blood Transfusion Service rarely manages to collect its target of 1 million units annually. The World Health Organization says the period allows the donor to assess whether they have any side effects after vaccination. The week delay is said to be worsening an already existing problem where hospitals are struggling to fill their blood banks. Now, more than half of South Africa's 9 provinces are officially experiencing the third surge of COVID-19 positive numbers. In the last reporting cycle, the country recorded over 13,000 new cases in a 24-hour period. On Tuesday, President Cyril Ramaphosa returned the country to level 3 lockdown, which the South African Medical Association thinks may not make a difference. Some feels the third wave may be worse than the previous 2. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Debia, spoke with the Vice President Research of the South African Medical Research Council, which advises government, Professor Jeffrey Mpalele, who explained the scenario the country is grappling with at the moment.
We're dealing with new cases of COVID-19, and these cases are driven largely by one province, the Gauteng province. As you know, that Gauteng province is a densely populated province, and is the province with the largest population in South Africa. So these cases are not surprising, given that for the first wave and the second wave, Gauteng province was slightly spared compared to other provinces. So my thinking is that there is still a huge deficit in terms of population immunity. And this is the reason you see, these soaring cases in Gauteng province.
Tuesday night, President Ramaphosa, announced returning to level 3 lockdown, which has sparked all sorts of debates over livelihoods or lives, livelihoods and lives as well. What do you really think? Do you think level 3 is enough? Because you have Sama saying this is not really enough. Do you think something tougher should have been done?
At this stage, I don't think the lockdowns should be interpreted as if is to arrest, the transmission of the virus completely. We know initially that the intention of the hard lockdown was to prepare the system to deal with COVID-19. But now the different levels, whether you are at level 1 or level 3, these are just to remind people about the seriousness of COVID-19 and also to make sure that they minimize the movement of people. But I don't think that the restrictions were intended to really, bring the movement of people to a complete still, because it is not possible. I think the president has got a difficult balancing act to follow because he has to make sure that the economy continues and at the same time public and social measures to counteract COVID-19 also continue.
Staying in South Africa, but to other developments, the police have opened an investigation after 20 unidentified bodies were found in the gold mining town of Orkney. The police suspect the deceased, who were found wrapped in white plastic bags, to be people working there without permission. They said the deceased had severe burns on their bodies and autopsies were being done to identify the cause of death. The bodies were discovered in 2 locations in the town. 5 of the bodies were discovered outside an old unused mine shaft in Lawrence Park on Tuesday, and the next day 14 more bodies were found at Ariston Road near a railway line. Our South Africa Bureau Chief Betty Dibia joins us now. Betty, I know a lot is going on with the COVID-19 infections in South Africa as the government tries to get a hang of the situation. But how are citizens responding to this third wave and, its further impact on daily lives?
Well, citizens are going about their daily lives. That's why government is worried that many people are not heeding to the pharmaceutical intervention or the guidelines given for people to just stay safe, wear your mask, avoid crowds and all that. You're seeing that even political gatherings are happening. Yesterday was June 16, which is National Youth Day. You had a party like the EFF addressing the crowd, and many of them were all jam-packed in one place, many not wearing a mask, and then he was threatening to call on the people to not listen to the government except vaccines are provided. So there are so many things. The onus is on the people now. While government is tampering to get a hand or control the situation, the people playing their own part in controlling what's going on and reducing the spread of the virus. I mean, overnight between Tuesday and Wednesday, Tuesday and Wednesday, you had over 13,000 cases, 13,200 plus cases. More than half of that from Gauteng province, where you have Johannesburg and Pretoria. So it worries them, and the appeal is going out again. Although the president went back, took the country back to level 3, but the South African Medical Association is saying, look, that's not enough, because we are struggling where we are. That's the doctors, and this wave may just be worse than the previous 2 that we have. Back again to the people, for people to adhere more and not be complacent. Help government do what it's trying to do while they're trying to get more vaccines in the arms of people.
All right, Betty, now to the investigations into the 20 unidentified bodies found in the gold mining town of Orkney. What more do we know about circumstances surrounding the deaths and their identities?
Nothing much more than all that you've already said, but we know that an inquest docket has been opened by the police. They're trying to find out the circumstances surrounding the deaths of the people. But it's not a new picture in the country. In a country where illegal mining thrives, there's so many abandoned mines, especially Gauteng is a place of gold. So there are many abandoned old mines in Gauteng province, as I said, where you have Johannesburg and Pretoria. And you have what they call the Zama Zama phenomenon, where Zama Zama means trying your luck. So many people from different countries, between other provinces and other countries like Malawi, Lesotho, and all that, they all come in here. Back in hand, you see people going underground. It's a totally different world out there. I mean, there's life underground in the country here, and most of these operations are controlled by crime gangs. So underground, these people are exposed to toxic. Some of these factors may be responsible for the death if they had time to cover them up in plastic bags. Explosions or explosives underground there as well, and then collapsing shafts. That's apart from the gang violence underground. They're armed. We've covered a time when some miners were trapped underground, and the police may not know. There may be more bodies, according to the National Union of Mine Workers president, who said there may be more, but the police is not even trained to police underground, which is a totally different world. Yeah. And there are thousands who operate underground. So hopefully the puzzle will be solved soon. But it's a recurring picture that we see in the country where you have the Zama Zama phenomenon. And people are saying, maybe we should start regulating these illegal miners who actually cost the country hundreds of thousands of rands every year.
Yeah, a really, really tragic situation there. Betty, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed.
Thank you very much.
Well, here in Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari has visited Maiduguri, the Borno state capital, on a one-day working visit. He arrived to a warm welcome by students who lined the streets, after which he made his way into the parade ground where the troops of Operation Hadikai were waiting to welcome him. In an address to the troops, the president encouraged them to strengthen interagency cooperation. He assured them of sustained investment in high-caliber military hardware to cater for both the short and long-term requirements, which will be deployed to the theatre of operation soon. In reference to the IDPs, President Buhari said concerted efforts are being made to fast-track reconstruction and development programs in the affected communities in the northeast, which will enhance the resettlement of displaced persons as well as a restoration of popular community life as they return to their homes. And our former Côte d'Ivoire leader, Laurent Gbagbo, is on his way home for the first time since he was arrested and handed over to the International Criminal Court in November 2011 for his role in the 2010 to 2011 post-election crisis. Mr. Gbagbo was acquitted of all charges on the 15th of January 2019, and the ICC upheld the acquittal in March 2021. Ivorian authorities have promised that he will be received with all the honors due to a former head of state. Supporters have been waiting excitedly for his return, all set with flags, chanting and dancing in large numbers. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shuboale.